Joining us on the line right now, KT McFarland, Fox News national security analyst. You know, you should follow her on Twitter. It's at KT McFarland. I follow her, and I learn something every day because I do. Good morning, KT.
Good morning, guys.
All right, so, the whole thing of what's going on with ISIS. Are we at war? Are we not at war? Are we going to have boots on the ground? Are we not going to have boots on the ground? Listen very quickly to the words of General Martin Dempsey, who is, of course, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, when asked about this question on Capitol Hill.
Our military advisors will help the Iraqis conduct campaign planning, arrange for enabler and logistics support, and coordinate our coalition activities. If we reach the point where I believe our advisors should accompany Iraq troops on attacks against specific ISIL targets, I'll recommend that to the President.
So there you have it. He seems to be saying that in some circumstances it might be necessary to have boots on the ground, something that the President says he doesn't want. I detect a dichotomy. Over at the Pentagon, it seems like they're trying to make the argument that we are going to need boots on the ground. At the White House, they're not interested in that whatsoever.
It's about right. The President's laid out this mission, which is to degrade, defeat, destroy Al-Qaeda. I'm sorry. That's what the Afghanistan mission was, degrade, defeat, destroy Al-Qaeda. The Iraq mission is to degrade, defeat, destroy ISIS. Now, the Afghan mission hasn't worked out real well. And I think what the President's done is laid out his plan, then says no boots on the ground, and then says, okay, Pentagon's over to you.
Yeah,
and
figure it out, would you?
Figure it out. And they've said, we can't do it. They basically said, if you listen to the testimony yesterday, at one point they said, well, maybe half of the Iraq army is ready to fight. The other half is so infested with partisan sectarian Shiites that they're not ready to fight. We're going to have to go train them. Train them? We spent $30 billion training and equipping the Iraqi army. And they don't fight, or they don't fight the guys that don't want to fight. And then to say, well, we're going to have the other part of it's going to be this new Syrian rebel army. Syrian rebel army? These are the guys who 2 weeks ago were pharmacists and doctors and lawyers.
Right.
Who are they now? And most intelligence assessments, at least in the public world, say that the chief rebels in Syria are Al-Qaeda. So where are we going to find these moderate Syrian rebels? We've got to find them. We've got to build a training base for them in Saudi Arabia. We've got to train them. We've got to equip them. And then we've got to stand them up and send them back out to fight ISIS, a group which even the Iraqi army fled from at the first moment. I just think this whole thing sounds like just a prescription for disaster. And when the chairman said, well, I'm going to go to the President and ask for, effectively boots on the ground, and then at the same time the Secretary of Defense said, well, we don't, the President doesn't feel he needs to seek any additional authority from Congress. But that sounds like, to me, translated into common English, they're going to mission creep their way into another Iraq war without Congress's approval.
KT, to that point, in terms of who was doing the real fighting on the ground, I thought that Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina made a really good point with a question that unfortunately never got answered. And I want to play it for you, because Lindsey Graham is wrong about a lot, but he's been right about so much of this with regard to the terror threat. Listen to this question and tell me what you think the answer is.
Okay, if I may just follow this point. So our national defense, in terms of stopping ISIL from killing thousands or millions of Americans if they get the capability, really comes down to whether or not we can convince the Arab world to go in there and defeat these guys.
And you never got an answer, but that kind of is what our plan is right now, right?
The plan is like a three-legged stool. Syrian rebel army, got to create it. Iraqi army, got to make it fight and not fight each other. And third is this Arab coalition, and they're not signing up. The countries that really matter to sign up, Turkey, Egypt, they're not signing up. And so I think we're going to be left with a situation 6 months down the road, probably 3 months down the road, where we're going to have three choices. We're either going to walk away, or we're going to send in boots on the ground, and big boots on the ground, not 100 here, 200 there, but several thousand, maybe over 5,000.
Right.
Or we're going to turn to the Iranians and say, you guys help us. You're going to help us. We need your boots on the ground. And the price the Iranians will extract from us is tacit approval of their nuclear program. I just think this whole thing is a prescription for disaster. It's a prescription for a very unhappy American people. And secondly, the part of it that matters most to us, not what happens in the Middle East, is what happens here. And where's the Homeland Defense part of this? Where's the part about sealing the porous southern border, making sure that the U.S. passport holders and European passport holders who are fighting for ISIS don't somehow get, how are we going to stop them at the border? How are we going to drop the political correctness and start looking at those people? And then I would say down the road, where the heck is missile defense?
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, while we're focusing on ISIS and what we should do there, we are sending 3,000 troops into Africa to fight the Ebola virus. Is this something that the military should be involved in?
Oh, boy, this is a tough one because on the one hand, our military is not trained to do this. Supposedly they're not going to go do any kind of medical part of it. They're just going to be logistics, crowd control, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but you're in an environment where this virus is running rampant. You are putting people at risk, and you're right, they're not trained for this.
They're not trained for this, and supposedly, they're going to wear their hazmat suits, everything's going to be fine. On the other hand, what happens if this Ebola virus really does become the new Black Plague? What if it leaves Africa because there's no public health system in these countries which have Ebola outbreaks? That means the Ebola outbreaks will spread, they'll grow, they'll go to the entire country.
I get all that, but aren't there other agencies that are better equipped than the U.S. military to do this?
I would sure hope so. And if they're not, I think somebody ought to be really fast making a lot of vaccines to vaccinate the American people.
All right, Katie McFarland, thanks for joining us today. By the way, when you were at Foggy Bottom, did you ever scrub any of the Secretary of State's documents there in the basement before there was an investigation?
We wouldn't have dreamed of it.
Just curious. Thanks, KT.
Just thought we'd